The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall sparkled under the light of 3 suns. Inside, representatives from over 10,000 alien civilizations filled the spiraling tiers of seats that reached toward the towering ceiling. The air hummed with translator devices as countless languages merged into a steady drone of anticipation. At the center of the hall, the High Speaker, an ancient being with translucent skin and glowing internal organs, raised all 4 of its arms for silence. The assembly quieted immediately, their attention fixed on the holographic display floating above the central platform. "We gather today," the High Speaker's voice resonated through the hall, "to vote on Motion 7249, the integration of Species 4872, designation, human, into our galactic labor force." The euphemism wasn't lost on anyone present. Labor force had long been the Council's polite term for their vast empire of enslaved species. The display showed images of Earth, sprawling cities, military bases, farming communities, and space stations. To the assembled aliens, it appeared primitive, barely worth noting except for 2 crucial factors that the High Speaker proceeded to enumerate. The species demonstrates remarkable physical adaptability and cognitive flexibility, it continued, gesturing at data streams that appeared beside the images. Their planetary conditions vary from extreme cold to extreme heat, from sea level to high altitude, from desert to tropical. They have survived and thrived in all these environments. Additionally, their population growth rate and reproductive capability make them ideal for our labor needs across multiple sectors. In the middle tier, a representative from a silicon-based civilization raised a crystalline appendage. What of their technological level? Their defensive capabilities? The High Speaker's internal organs pulsed with what passed for amusement among its kind. Their most advanced weapons use primitive chemical propellants and basic nuclear fission. Their space travel capabilities are limited to their own solar system, and even then, barely beyond their 4th planet. They possess no energy shields, no faster-than-light travel, no quantum communications. They would be unable to detect our presence until it was far too late. The assembly murmured in approval. Another representative, this one a floating cloud of ionized gas, sparked with concern. And their potential for resistance? Minimal, the High Speaker replied. Our analysis shows their planet is divided into numerous competing factions. They have no unified planetary defense system. Their military forces are scattered and technologically inferior. The species shows promise in terms of innovation, but they are centuries away from achieving anything that could challenge even our most basic defensive systems. The vote was called. Across the vast chamber, representatives registered their choices through neural interfaces. The holographic display showed the results in real time, green lights flickering across the tiered seating as vote after vote was cast in favor of the motion. In the end, the results were overwhelming, 92% in favor, 5% abstaining, and 3% against. The High Speaker raised its arms once more, its skin now glowing with satisfaction. The motion passes. Preparation for Species 4872 integration will begin immediately. Standard protocols apply: initial surveillance, strategic infiltration, systematic disruption of planetary defense systems, and finally, full harvesting operations. What none of them noticed was a small anomaly in their supposedly impenetrable quantum communications network. For a fraction of a second, their entire discussion had been intercepted by what they would have dismissed as impossible, a human quantum listening post hidden on Mars. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out of the hall, discussing their plans for utilizing their soon-to-be-acquired human workforce, a coded message was already racing toward Earth through channels the aliens didn't know existed. It contained everything: the council's plans, their technological capabilities, their strategic weaknesses, and most importantly, their fundamental misconception about humanity's true level of advancement. The High Speaker, watching the assembly disperse, felt the familiar satisfaction of another successful expansion of the labor force. In its long existence, it had overseen the integration of hundreds of species. This one would be no different, or so it thought. In just under 24 hours, it would learn just how catastrophically wrong that assumption was. The alien invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their massive ships casting long shadows across the void. 500 vessels, each the size of a small moon, arranged themselves in the standard harvest formation that had brought doom to countless civilizations before. The fleet commander, watching Earth's blue sphere on his view screen, felt something almost like pity. The planet looked so peaceful, so unaware of its impending fate. Their scans showed exactly what they expected: primitive satellites in low orbit, a handful of basic space stations, and a few scattered outposts on their red neighbor planet. Nothing that could possibly resist their mighty armada. "Begin the standard approach," the commander ordered. "Maintain stealth fields at maximum. Prepare harvester units for deployment." The fleet moved forward with practiced precision, their stealth technology making them invisible to what they believed were Earth's primitive detection systems. They passed Neptune, then Uranus, their confidence growing with each unopposed movement. As they approached the asteroid belt, the first sign that something was wrong appeared on their sensors. One of the junior officers noticed a strange energy reading but dismissed it as sensor interference. That mistake would cost them dearly. The first shot came from what appeared to be an ordinary asteroid. A beam of pure darkness, not energy, not matter, but the absence of both, lanced out and touched one of the alien ships. The vessel didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, along with every atom of matter that had comprised it. "Impossible," the fleet commander roared, his species equivalent of adrenaline flooding his system. "Emergency shields. Battle stations." But their shields, designed to resist every known form of energy weapon, proved useless against what came next. From hidden bases across the asteroid belt, humanity's defense fleet emerged. Their ships were smaller than the alien vessels but moved with impossible speed, seeming to bend space itself around them. "They have null-point weapons," one of the alien officers screamed. "They have quantum phase drives." "How?" "These technologies are beyond even our theoretical understanding." The alien fleet's formation broke as they tried to respond to an attack that defied everything they thought they knew about physics. Their return fire, plasma bolts and energy beams, passed harmlessly through the human vessels as if they weren't even there. From Mars, a massive installation that had been disguised as a crater powered up. It emitted no energy that the aliens could detect, generated no radiation they could measure, but its effects were devastating. Entire squadrons of alien ships simply winked out of existence, their matter converted to something else, something that their sensors couldn't even register. "Retreat," the fleet commander ordered, but it was too late. The human ships had surrounded them, moving through space in ways that should have been impossible. They didn't use hyperspace or warp drives, they simply were where they needed to be, as if they had always been there. A transmission cut through their communication channels, bypassing every encryption and security measure as if they didn't exist. The message was simple, broadcast in perfect galactic standard. "You thought us primitive. You thought us defenseless. You thought you could enslave us. This was your first and final mistake." The alien commander, watching his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by weapons that shouldn't exist, finally understood. They hadn't been watching a primitive species struggling to reach the stars. They had been watching a facade, a carefully maintained illusion designed to lure out exactly the kind of threat they represented. In the space of 30 minutes, the greatest invasion fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Council was reduced to scattered atoms. Only a single ship was allowed to survive, the commander's vessel, its engines and weapons disabled by technologies that its crew couldn't even begin to comprehend. As the human ships surrounded his crippled vessel, the commander received one final transmission: "Return to your council. Tell them what you witnessed here. And deliver this message: the harvest has ended. Forever." The commander's ship was then unceremoniously flung back into hyperspace, its automated systems set to return it to the Galactic Council's capital. The message it carried would shake the foundations of the galaxy's oldest empire, and signal the beginning of humanity's emergence from the shadows. The Galactic Council's emergency session erupted into chaos as the surviving commander's ship limped into the capital system. The vessel's sensor logs played out before the assembled representatives, showing the complete destruction of their invasion fleet by weapons that defied their understanding of physics itself. But they had no time to fully process this unprecedented defeat. As the Council argued about how to respond, humanity launched its counterattack. The first sign came from the slave worlds in the Outer Rim. Massive industrial complexes, where billions of enslaved beings labored to support the Council's empire, suddenly went dark. Communication channels fell silent. The Council's overseers reported strange ships appearing out of nowhere, using weapons that simply ignored their defensive systems. Impossible, the High Speaker declared, its translucent skin pulsing with agitation. They cannot have reached the Outer Rim so quickly. Even with our fastest ships, the journey takes weeks. But humanity hadn't traveled there, they had already been there, waiting. For centuries, human agents had infiltrated every level of the Council society. They had posed as slaves, traders, even as minor Council species. They had watched, learned, and prepared. Now, those sleeper agents activated hidden facilities across the galaxy. Quantum beacons lit up in systems thousands of light-years apart, creating a network that the Council scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. Through these beacons, humanity's true fleet emerged. The ships seemed to break every rule of physics that the Council held sacred. They didn't move through space, they moved with space, folding reality itself around them. Their weapons didn't destroy their targets, they rewrote the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas, causing Council technology to simply stop functioning. In the Centauri sector, a human fleet liberated 3 slave worlds in less than an hour. The Council's mighty orbital fortresses, armed with enough firepower to reduce continents to ash, fell silent as waves of human vessels phased through their shields as if they weren't there. On the factory world of Nexus Prime, the largest industrial complex in Council space, the overseers watched in horror as their security forces' weapons transformed into harmless light, their power cores went cold, and their communication systems broadcast liberation messages in every known language. The High Speaker received desperate messages from across the galaxy. Council fleets were being systematically disabled. Slave worlds were declaring independence. Hidden resistance movements, armed with human technology, rose up against their oppressors. The careful order of millennia crumbled in a matter of days. How did we not see this coming? Demanded a representative of the First Ones, their ancient eyes blazing with fury. How did they hide such power from us? The answer came from one of their own analysts, a junior researcher who had studied human history. We saw what they wanted us to see, she explained, her voice trembling. Their visible technology, their apparent divisions, their seemingly primitive space program, it was all a facade. They showed us a reflection of what we expected to see, while their true civilization operated in the shadows. A transmission cut through their secure channels, bypassing defenses that had never been breached in the Council's history. The message displayed in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, visible to all. For 10,000 years, you have enslaved species across the galaxy. You judged them by their visible technology, their apparent capabilities, their surface-level achievements. You never looked deeper. You never questioned why some worlds seemed too perfect to be primitive, too inviting to be defenseless. That was your mistake. The message continued, its implications sending shudders through the assembly. Humanity has watched your empire grow. We have witnessed your atrocities. We have prepared for this moment since before your council took its current form. The age of slavery ends today. As the message faded, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The council's power was crumbling. Their mighty fleets were being reduced to drifting hulks. Their slave worlds were being liberated one by one. And through it all, human ships continued to appear wherever they were needed, using technology that turned the Council's understanding of physics into obsolete theory. The galaxy's oldest empire was facing not just defeat, but complete systematic dismantling. And they were powerless to stop it. As the Galactic Council's empire crumbled, their intelligence services frantically pieced together the truth about humanity's hidden past. What they discovered shattered every assumption they had made about Earth and its inhabitants. Deep in the Martian caves, Council infiltrators discovered ancient archives that told an impossible story. Humanity hadn't developed once, but many times over millions of years. Each civilization had risen to heights that surpassed even the Council's current technology, only to deliberately go into hiding, leaving behind carefully crafted facades of primitive development. The archives revealed that the first human civilization had achieved quantum mastery 50,000 years ago. Instead of expanding outward, they had expanded inward, learning to manipulate the fabric of reality itself. They had discovered that the universe was far stranger and more malleable than anyone had imagined. When they detected the first signs of alien civilizations, they made a critical decision. Rather than reveal themselves, they would watch and wait. Each time their civilization reached new heights, they would carefully hide their achievements, maintaining the illusion of a primitive world still struggling to reach the stars. "Look at these energy readings," one Council scientist reported, studying data from Earth's hidden installations. "They're not using power sources as we understand them. They're using the quantum fabric of space itself as an infinite energy source. The technology doesn't just break our laws of physics, it operates on principles we never even imagined." The Council's best minds struggled to comprehend human technology. Their ships didn't move through space, they existed in multiple points simultaneously, choosing their location through quantum probability manipulation. Their weapons didn't destroy targets, they locally rewrote the laws of physics, making enemy technology simply cease to function. Most shocking was the discovery of humanity's true population. What the Council had observed on Earth was only a fraction of human civilization. Vast cities existed in pocket dimensions throughout the solar system. Entire industrial complexes operated in quantum space, invisible to conventional detection methods. Billions of humans lived and worked in spaces that existed between the moments of conventional time. "They've been watching us for millennia," a Council historian realized, reviewing ancient records with new understanding. "Those primitive human slaves we thought we'd captured from Earth over the centuries, they were observers, gathering intelligence. Every time we encountered humans, they were exactly as primitive as we expected them to be. It was all staged." The human quantum network, they discovered, extended throughout the galaxy, hidden in dimensional spaces that the Council's science had deemed impossible. Through this network, humanity had witnessed every atrocity, every enslavement, every act of conquest the Council had committed. They had watched, learned, and prepared. Their technology had evolved beyond the need for massive ships or visible weapons. What the Council had witnessed in battle was merely what humanity chose to show them, demonstrations of power using concepts the Council could barely comprehend. "Their understanding of physics makes our science look like a child's toys," admitted the Council's chief scientist, studying captured human technology. "We built our empire on manipulating energy and matter. They learned to manipulate reality itself." The Council's intelligence services uncovered hidden human outposts on every world they investigated. These facilities hadn't been recently built, they had existed for thousands of years, gathering data, monitoring the Council's activities, and waiting for the right moment to act. Most humbling was the discovery that humanity could have stopped the Council at any time. They had chosen this moment not out of necessity, but because they had finally gathered enough evidence of the Council's crimes to justify intervention. The vote to enslave humanity hadn't triggered their response, it had simply provided the legal and moral justification they had been waiting for. As these revelations spread through the Council's remaining power structure, a terrible realization dawned. They hadn't been the advanced civilization discovering a primitive world. They had been the primitive civilization, operating under assumptions so basic that humanity had found it trivially easy to manipulate them. The age of the Council's ignorant dominance was over. The true masters of the galaxy had finally chosen to emerge from the shadows. The systematic dismantling of the Galactic Council's slave empire revealed horrors beyond even humanity's worst expectations. As human forces liberated world after world, the true scope of the Council's crimes became clear. On the mining world of Deep Core, they found entire species evolved to live in perpetual darkness, their eyes long since adapted to the endless night of the underground mines. Generations had been born and died without seeing starlight, their only purpose to extract precious minerals for their masters. The factory planets were worse. Billions of beings worked in vast industrial complexes, their bodies modified by Council scientists to better serve their roles. Some had extra arms grafted on to operate machinery more efficiently. Others had been altered to breathe toxic atmospheres, their children inheriting these improvements as an evolutionary curse. "We knew it was bad," one human commander noted, watching as medical teams treated the latest group of liberated slaves. But seeing it firsthand. He didn't need to finish the thought. Every human involved in the liberation effort had seen enough to understand why their ancestors had waited so long, gathering evidence and preparing for this moment. The Council's research stations revealed even darker secrets. Entire species had been used as test subjects for genetic experiments. The Council scientists had treated sentient beings as raw material, reshaping them to serve various industrial needs. They found children engineered to work in zero gravity, their bones hollowed and muscles enhanced for space labor. Human quantum sensors detected hidden facilities in pocket dimensions similar to their own, where the Council had attempted to replicate advanced technology they had glimpsed but never understood. These experiments had cost countless lives, as enslaved species were forced to test dangerous prototypes. On what had once been a beautiful ocean world, they discovered a species engineered to breathe underwater, forced to farm the planet's vast kelp fields. The Council had seen them as an elegant solution to underwater resource extraction. The humans saw generations of slaves who had never known freedom. As each world was liberated, human medical technology, far beyond anything the Council possessed, began the work of healing. Species that had been genetically modified could have their original forms restored if they wished. Those born into slavery were offered choices they had never dreamed possible. The Council's carefully maintained hierarchy collapsed as its foundation of slave labor crumbled. Worlds that had enjoyed luxury for millennia suddenly found themselves without the endless supply of resources and labor they had taken for granted. The mighty estates of Council nobles fell silent as their slave-powered utilities failed. But humanity's forces didn't just liberate, they systematically documented every atrocity, every crime, every act of cruelty. Quantum recorders captured evidence that would be impossible to deny or destroy. The Council would face justice not merely for their attempted enslavement of humanity, but for their crimes against countless species over thousands of years. The Council members who had so casually voted to enslave humanity now watched in horror as their own security forces were overwhelmed by weapons they couldn't comprehend. Their planetary shields, designed to repel any known form of attack, proved useless against human ships that simply phased through them as if they didn't exist. Most devastating was the revelation that many Council members' own servants, beings they had thought were perfectly engineered slaves, were actually human observers. For centuries, these agents had witnessed and recorded their masters' crimes, gathering evidence while waiting for the right moment to act. As the liberation forces approached the Council's core worlds, the full weight of their situation finally became clear to the ruling species. They had built their empire on the suffering of others, believing their technological superiority made them untouchable. Now they faced a power that made their greatest achievements look primitive, wielded by a species that had waited patiently for millennia, building an airtight case against them. The reckoning they had brought upon themselves was only beginning. Justice, long delayed but never forgotten, was finally at hand. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, once a symbol of absolute power, now served as a testament to their downfall. The same chamber that had hosted the vote to enslave humanity was filled to capacity, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Gone was the arrogant confidence of the past. Now, fear permeated the air. The High Speaker, its translucent skin now pale and sickly, stood at the central platform. Around it, the remaining council representatives, those who hadn't fled or been arrested for war crimes, watched in silence as human ships appeared in the sky above their capital world, passing through their defensive shields as if they were merely holographic projections. "We are gathered today," the High Speaker's voice trembled, "to formally request terms of surrender from the human species." The words seemed to physically pain it, each syllable a reminder of their catastrophic mistake. Suddenly, several council members gasped as their own subordinates, beings they had worked alongside for years, stepped forward, their appearances shimming as quantum disguise fields deactivated. Human agents had been among them all along, watching, recording, gathering evidence of their crimes. One of these agents, a woman who had posed as a minor diplomatic aide for 3 centuries, took the central platform. Her simple gray uniform bore no rank or insignia, yet she commanded the attention of every being in the hall. "For thousands of years," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast chamber, "we watched as you built an empire on the backs of enslaved species. We witnessed your debates in this very hall, where you casually decided the fates of entire civilizations. We recorded everything." The quantum screens around the hall activated, showing scenes from countless worlds, slave markets, genetic modification facilities, labor camps, punishment centers. Each image was accompanied by the name and rank of the council member who had ordered or approved these atrocities. "Your own records condemn you," she continued. "The evidence we've gathered would fill the data banks of 1,000 worlds. Every crime, every act of cruelty, every casual decision to enslave another species, all of it documented and verified." The High Speaker raised its arms in a gesture of supplication. "We offer unconditional surrender," it declared. "All slave worlds will be freed immediately. All genetic modification programs will cease. All our technology and resources will be turned over to human authority. We beg for mercy." The human agent's expression remained neutral. "Mercy? Like the mercy you showed to the billions you enslaved? Like the mercy you showed to children born into bondage, their bodies modified to better serve your needs? Like the mercy you planned to show humanity?" Nevertheless, she activated a holodisplay showing humanity's terms. First, the immediate dissolution of the Galactic Council and all its power structures. Second, the arrest and trial of all those involved in slave trading, genetic modification programs, and other crimes against sentient beings. Third, the establishment of a new galactic federation where all species would have equal representation and rights. "But what of our people?" one council member cried out. "What of our worlds?" The human agent's response was measured. "Unlike you, we do not punish entire species for the crimes of their leaders. Your civilian populations will not suffer for your actions. They will be given the opportunity to join the new federation as equals, not masters." Another council member, older than most, spoke up. "We have seen your power. You could have stopped us at any time. Why wait so long?" "Because true justice requires more than force," she replied. "We needed to document your crimes, to build an irrefutable case that would stand for all time. Future generations will know exactly what happened here, and why it can never be allowed to happen again." The terms were accepted, they had no choice. As the council members signed the surrender documents, more human ships appeared in the sky above. But these vessels carried not weapons, but humanitarian aid and medical teams. Even in victory, humanity demonstrated the mercy their former oppressors had never shown. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, not in fire and destruction as many had feared, but in a carefully managed transition that would reshape the galaxy forever. 5 years after the Council's surrender, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The former Council chamber, once a symbol of oppression, now hosted the first gathering of the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. Representatives from thousands of species, former slaves and former masters alike, filled the renovated hall. The changes were profound. Former slave worlds flourished under their own governance, their people finally free to determine their own destinies. Human medical technology had reversed generations of genetic modification, allowing enslaved species to reclaim their original forms if they chose. Others, who had been born with modifications, were given the choice to keep them or have them altered to their preferences. The first ones and their closest allies, stripped of their empire, were confined to their home systems. They watched from afar as their former slave worlds developed into thriving civilizations. Some of their younger generations, horrified by the revelations of their elders' crimes, volunteered to help with restoration efforts on worlds their people had once exploited. Human quantum technology, carefully shared with former slave species, revolutionized everything from medicine to transportation. The quantum network that had once been humanity's secret tool for gathering evidence became the backbone of a new galactic communication system, allowing instant contact between even the most distant worlds. On the former factory world of Nexus Prime, where generations had once toiled in brutal conditions, a new university complex rose from the restored landscape. Here, species from across the galaxy studied together, sharing knowledge and culture that had been suppressed for millennia. The same facilities that had once produced weapons and tools of oppression now manufactured medical equipment and terraforming technology. The deep space mining operations, once places of unspeakable suffering, were now automated or staffed by well-paid volunteer workers from various species. The children of former slaves attended schools where they learned not just technology and science, but their own histories and cultures, preserved by hidden human observers over the centuries. Most remarkable was the emergence of hybrid communities, where former master species lived and worked alongside those they had once enslaved. These communities, while initially tense, became models of reconciliation and cooperation. Young members of former council species often sought out such communities, eager to prove that they could be better than their predecessors. Human ships still patrolled the galaxy, but their role had changed. Instead of gathering evidence of crimes, they now responded to calls for aid, provided disaster relief, and protected developing worlds from any who might seek to exploit them. Their quantum technology, once hidden, now served as a deterrent against any return to the old ways. The trials of former council leaders continued, each case meticulously documented and broadcast across the galaxy. But even here, humanity's approach surprised many. The trials focused on restoration and reconciliation rather than mere punishment. Convicted council members were sentenced to work on restoration projects, helping to rebuild the worlds they had once exploited. In the quantum archives on Mars, where humanity had stored evidence of council crimes for centuries, a new wing opened. Here, the history of the liberation was preserved, not as a record of vengeance, but as a reminder of the importance of vigilance against tyranny. Former slaves and their descendants came here to learn their true histories, while former master species came to understand the full scope of their civilization's crimes. Perhaps most powerful was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where former slaves could share their stories and former masters could acknowledge their crimes. These sessions, painful but necessary, helped break the cycle of hatred and fear that the Council had cultivated for millennia. As the new Federation matured, humanity's role evolved. They became teachers, guides, and protectors, sharing their advanced technology carefully to ensure it would not be misused. Their long vigil, watching and waiting in the shadows, had transformed into an open guardianship of galactic peace. The galaxy had entered a new age. The vote that was meant to enslave humanity had instead broken the chains of countless species, replacing an empire built on suffering with a federation founded on freedom and mutual respect. The universe, as the Council had known it, was gone forever, and in its place, something far better had begun.